Wayne, could you put him in the hotel room?
Mr. Bell, Mr. Michael Bell. Your table is ready.
He needs to transform and roll out.
Maybe scavenger shot him.
First we have to say Ikutza, since I'm told it's Cybertonian, so that's good morning. Is that a question you're looking elsewhere? You want to bid on something? Okay, go ahead.
Question number one. To Mr. Bell. I've got the opportunity to get a job flipping burgers at McDonald's, and I was wanting to know if you could give me some pointers how to...
Pointers on how to what?
Pointers on how to start that career as flipping burgers at McDonald's. Or I've also got the opportunity to get a job as an usher in a Chinese theater.
Well, you're starting right, because that's exactly what I did. And you're right on the nose, because we talked, didn't we?
Yes.
We talked.
And actually, we brought you a gift as a token.
Slag you. What is that?
Well, do you want to open it now, or do you want to just give it after the panel?
Well, if it's a dildo, I don't know.
It's funny because the guy we got this off eBay told us that it was a swoop, and then we got it in the mail, and well.
You're serious? Get that up here right now. My own swoop. Well, what I had told the guys at Cold Slag that I started flipping burgers and barbecuing chickens and things of that nature. Now that I'm a vegetarian, I feel terrible. Thank you. Thank you.
He's not a vegetarian.
Yeah.
He eats the enemy. There's a difference.
This is great. Thank you so much. That is really super. But you didn't get anything, did you? This is great. This is really super. Thank you so much. And then, of course, I wound up working at an usher at Grauman's Chinese Theater. And I can't tell you a lot of the jobs I did since then because I now have a grown child and I don't want them to get out. But in the meantime, as you all know, that wound up doing a lot of on-camera, which is what I originally intended to do, and then eventually got into voiceover, so it didn't make any difference what I look like anymore. That's even better. I can play all those wonderful heroes, which I couldn't do when I was doing on-camera. So that answers a question that nobody asked. Who's next?
To continue on the question that nobody asked, we all have an unbelievable flexibility as far as what we're allowed to do and encouraged to do. We can be 70 feet tall, we can be 70 feet wide, we can fight galactic battles, we can save the planet, we can save the universe. It's all in a day's work. But voice in general has the only limitations that it has are the limitations of the actor performing it. We work in a medium that takes itself much more seriously now than it ever has, I think, in the past. Normally when a show is first in its formative stages, we'll see breakdowns, drawings. Sometimes the artists will be present. People will talk to you about their vision for a project thematically or character-wise. And it's a wonderful, interesting challenge. It's not just silly voices or different voices, usually, or at least what I've found in the projects I've been on, you're surrounded by people who care. What was nice about the people we met last night and the people we're meeting in elevators and lobbies is what we perceive as far as a body of work that is past tense for us, it was performed some time ago, is still clearly present tense and presumably future tense because you as audience and interested parties care. I'm just bringing that to your attention. I'm having a really good time meeting everybody.
Yeah, you guys are super. You know, you must know that for us, when we grew up, it was Mel Blanc and people like that. And
John Stevens.
John Stevens. I don't tell you how old John is, but we cut him in half and count the rings. And
count the rings.
No, incidentally, I bring you greetings from someone who was the most maligned man in our sessions, and that's Wally Burr, who directed them. He couldn't be here, and if he had been, he would give you a chapter in verse. Without him, this show couldn't have really got together. Even though he was a grill master and a hard taskmaster, he did it all. I think he was the only one privy to a storyboard, which made it interesting. He took us through every nuance of the characters that we worked on as we were on mic. In fact, he read every line for us.
Yes.
They smiled, I know. But even to this day, 17 years later, people talk about Wally Burr, you know. But without him, he was a driving force. And looking back on it, I say this show never probably would have come to air.
We had about 20 of us in one room. God bless you. We had about 20 of us in one room, and it's kind of like a comics convention. You have to remember that although we did voiceovers, many of us were doing on-camera work, and we're appearing in television shows at the same time. So we were always on. All the group, everybody, for even someone like Chris Latta, the dear departed, was a stand-up comic. And then you had myself and Frank and Greg, who had a tremendous theater background, and John was doing television. John and I did a soap opera together years ago. And, he was the killer, and I was the one who was going to find out that he was the one who was killing his wife, as I recall. And we, all of us, were what we refer to as, Unitsushi expression, voicing off. So we all sat around and just joked and got silly, and Wally had to keep us in tow and keep us focused in what we were doing. And then, as you can see by some of the programs, we've done 6 or 7 voices, and then we, at the same time, I think somewhere around there, correlated with G.I. Joe, and we had other shows at the same time. So after a while, you had to remember what characters you had for that particular show, and if you forgot them, you literally had voiceheimers. You didn't know where the heck you were. So Wally had to bring you back. And that's almost a deja vu, because yesterday we were talking to some of the guys and ladies that came up to talk to us, and they said, "Oh yeah, I really love that character." And I go, "What did it sound like?" And you knew. You described it. "Oh yeah, this one sounded like Clint Eastwood, and this one sounded like Deep Low." Oh yeah, now and then you brought it back, and then we could remember what it was we did for those particular characters. So thank you for bringing me back to that.
Well, there was such a thing as a reference tape, which they all carried, because you'd say, what did I do? What was that? That was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And they were new to us. The characters were new to us, so at the time. And after a while, you got into it and you had a memory for them. But the reference tapes we didn't have last night. And when you asked for a certain character to be reproduced for you, we had trouble with it sometimes.
Even with the voice references, it's still, you can't underestimate, I'm not underestimating our contribution to the show, to the characters, and to literally animating these visual characters. But on some level, we're the bottom of the food chain. We're given the words that someone else has honed down and made work. Wally Burr, on the other side of the glass, was the only person with access, aside from the producers and consultants, who had the big picture and knew how things fit. So when we would literally do war on the other side of the glass, and he would push us and push us and push us for performance above and beyond, he was the only one who knew what that was to marry with later in an animated state. So he worked us hard. He was a drill sergeant. And that brings up another interesting point, because as far as reference tapes, I was talking to somebody about this last night. One thing actors and voice actors are always cautioned about is don't deliver anything in an audition that you can't sustain. When I got Grimlock, they said, "We have good news and bad news." You got the part! Now for 70 or 80 or however many shows, you need to sustain that. I'm not of the opinion that you should do anything performance-wise by holding back or restraining. I think the real freedom is just in letting go. So I always trusted that it would be there, and it always was there, but it was a drain.
But you had blood. You had something like blood on the windows that were broken.
I remember, I think it was Michael who retrieved my tonsils, which were...
Wally's on the other side. He said,
Could you make that even bigger? Make it even bigger.
Wally wanted to be on our side.
You make that bigger, and that's not big enough.
I said, God, this is just a human being we have here.
Oh, no, that's not true.
Actually, not. He's the machine. You have a question.
Yes, it's about Welliver. One, is he still around? And did he ever collect outtakes? Did you have any really interesting material like that? Audio library?
Well, his outtakes are now on the porno channel. Because you don't want to hear the things that we said. Wally's still alive, well alive, and in the valley. Yeah, I must have clip notes somewhere.
It would be possible to, his company is still called Wallenberg Recording. I do know that most engineers keep a 1/4-inch tape running on sessions, and sometimes it winds up on a Christmas reel that you hear at a party, sometimes it winds up on a shelf, sometimes it's disregarded, but maybe your interest would encourage them to find it. It may exist somewhere.
Yeah, you would hear something that in the course of doing a session, we would turn around and I'd say something like,
"Oh, Grimlock, you got the bluest eyes."
I bet you say that to all the Dinobots.
It's out there.
No, Wally is very much alive, and he just returned from Europe where he visited the scene of his D-Day +4 landing on Utah Beach. So he was in the thick of it. He was an artillery, a tank commander, excuse me, and went through hell over there in World War II. So he was, it was an emotional visit for him, and the fact that he just got back from Europe, he was looking forward to another trip, but he sends his love. And,
You'll get to meet him. You'll get to meet him. He's a very interesting guy. We talked about the fact that when we did the film Transformers, as you all know, Orson Welles, the great Orson Welles, was on the film, and I begged him, please. I want to be there at that session. I'll make believe I'm a lackey. I'll run up alongside and go, "Master, master." Whatever you want, just so I could. He said, no. He really asked that it just be him and just the immediate guys who would be taping and the director. And at one point, word came back that Wally had made a suggestion. Wally, during the course of directing you, will sometimes read for you and kind of
Do it for you. You know, this is,
direction. Fine. And if you were a girl and you sounded like this,
he wanted you to sound like that because you were really butch and get in there because you wanted the Dinobots.
and so when Orson Welles was doing his Orson Welles thing, he said, "Mr. Welles, could you? I said, "You're not going to give me a line reading, are you?" No, sir. And then later on, as you probably know, I think it was about the end of the film or the middle of the film, something, Orson Welles had passed away, and I had spread the word that Wally killed Orson Welles. And I said his last words were, "Burn." And that got back to me, really took it well. It's terrible thing to say. Yeah.
Yes, did any of voice actors for Transformers take a pass at Susan Blue who played RC?
Did any of my voice actors make a pass at Susan Blue who played RC?
Oh, anyone who made a pass at Susan Blue? They're dead. Yeah. It's really sad.
I thought his last words were Rosebud.
I think it's appropriate that Orson Welles' last part was as a galactic entity, because he nearly had that stature on Earth.
And you, yes.
Some critics had fun with the fact that Orson Welles played a planet.
Orson Welles played a planet, yeah, because that's exactly what he said. And he was a planet in real life. I mean, he got the
Very big.
Yes, gentleman here. What's your name?
I'm Senate.
Say it again.
Senate.
Senate.
Yes.
Senator, stand up. Ask the question, sir.
All right, on G.I. Joe, you were due.
Yes.
Could you, for the crowd, give us a rousing Yo Joe?
Yo Joe! Was that it?
Sort of touching on something you commented on earlier. You know, lately we've been getting really good.
Microphones.
Thank you. Lately we've been getting really good movies that are coming out now, like Shrek and the new Final Fantasy movie that's coming out. And some people have been talking, you know, wondering about what's going to happen with movies in the future. And I was wondering for your take on it, is the new, the 3D movies like this, do you think they're going to be good for the future of movies? Do you think they're going to start overtaking live action and that type of thing?
You mean like Final Fantasy? It's very scary. I, for one, can feel a clenching in the nether regions of my body. I imagine the on-camera people even more frightened than we are, but I think there'll be room for on-camera people. What bothers us more to go from that, I think maybe we'll get a confirmation from the guys up here, are the amount of stars that are being used and visible people that are being used for voiceovers. I mean, when they were telling me, I did a show some time ago, did the pilot for a thing called Captain Planet, I think it was. And I was hired to be one of the regulars, and then they replaced us all with, I think Whoopi Goldberg replaced everybody. And they got Tom Cruise and his wife at the time, not Nicole Kidman, maybe somebody like that. And then they got some other names, some big stars, and I said, they got Tom Cruise to replace Neil Ross, who was originally Captain Planet. And all of us were so surprised that suddenly stars were doing a local television show. You know, for us, it was work, really major work. For them, it was, you know, per diem. And I said, why did they do? I said, look, you know, they offered me the lead in Born on the 4th of July. I said, get Tom Cruise. I don't do that. And so, and that escalated, and we all look around and say to each other, wow, do they really need Matt Damon? And yes, if they're good, great, fine, but they don't need it. That's not their job. It's not what they do. It's what we do. So that's my answer.
Speaking to that, and then back to the CGI stuff. I firmly believe that the burden of casting is on the casting director, and there are two schools of casting. The only correct school is that you find the voice that's absolutely appropriate for a given project. If that's a celebrity, so be it. Then that's absolutely as it should be. If it's to say, honey, you won't believe who I'm sitting across the table from, that's a less noble motive for casting. If it's the guess who we're having lunch with syndrome, or the free publicity syndrome, because a celebrity can generate a lot of press, and there's so much not tabloid, but extra access Hollywood, and all of that equates to dollars and amplifies box office possibilities. So those decisions, and on a business level, I have to tell you, I do understand the motivation, but I don't think it's as pure as focusing on the product and finding the correct voice from the entire pool of available talent. As far as the CGI, yes, it's a clear and present danger, because they can create effects that are as vivid as multi-million-dollar live-action effects in studio in-house. I was having this conversation last night also.
When you were young.
No, before that,
from the lobby floor.
I judge films based on what it is that they seek to accomplish. And if someone is seeking to accomplish the best CGI animated epic tale that they can, you know, so be it. That's fine. I don't think, I have to hope that will never be at the expense of the live action product. You know, if you follow that to its illogical extreme, they could probably digitize voice chips of Humphrey Bogart on, and you know, cast 40s actors and digitize their voices or their images. You know, it could all be abstracted to the nth degree, but I don't feel that an audience will accept that at the expense of everything else.
Certainly won't have a convention, will you? Talk to women. Another question. See a question over there.
I mean, Matt, given that all being what you said, do you think that, you know, the CGI animation, the 3D animation, is going to be, you know, the future of, you know, live action? Do you think that, you know, the CGI animation will be, you know, I can project.
Give him the rectal mic.
Yo, Matt.
Yo, Joe. Gentlemen, given all of that, how does an aspiring young voice actor get involved now?
Oh, boy.
Okay, the question always comes up about, people sometimes call me because I do teach voice animation just in my area. I'm not flying any place to do this. I teach voice animation basically to the professional actor because a lot of professional actors want to extend themselves in that direction, and they're not sure just exactly what they're going to do in terms of mic technique. They're used to moving and doing things, etc. And I teach it from an acting standpoint. So when I get a call from somebody that says, "Oh, hello, everybody tells me I have this fabulous voice," or "I've got this great voice, and a lot of people tell me I should be doing voiceovers and I want to do animation," and I say, "Look, let me make a comparison here. Having a voice, or a good voice, is okay. Everyone's got a voice, obviously. There's no such thing as a great voice, particularly, because you can use anything in terms of animation. You can twist it a certain way. If you got a voice like this, you know, or if you got a voice like this, whatever it is, it may work for you. But just having the voice and saying, or let's say particularly what you think is a good voice, is like having a 12-inch penis. It's of no value to anybody unless it gets hard. So, the point is, you study acting. You know how to use that tool. And that tool is of no value to you if you don't know how to use it. And I tell everybody that over the phone. And of course there's a lot of silence and a click buzz because that's the wrong number. You study acting. If you want to do voiceovers, you get into acting. You get into a group. You get into an improv group. You study with a teacher and you learn to develop a character. It is not just going, "Okay, I can do this voice, that's very good." Well, that goes nowhere unless you can act like this man and that man can act. And make that character come alive. Otherwise, that voice is limp, folks. Just with the penis.
Speaking to that, as far as the nuts and bolts, it sounds cryptic, but
This will never get on the air.
this is going to sound like a non-answer, but it's not. What you do is what comes next. If you're in need of those classes, if you're in need of expanding your abilities as a performer, then you do that next. If you're in need of a tape which you don't yet have, you do that next. If you're in need of really looking at what you bring to the table and making sure that you have something distinctive to offer, and that's where that voice that sounds like no one else absolutely works in your favor. At some point, you get off the bus, you knock on doors, you make mistakes, and you wait for something good, like an opportunity to happen. I had an acting teacher who said, if no one can talk you out of this, maybe you should do it. If anyone can talk you out of this, spare yourself. It's a hard go. The no's so far exceed the yeses that it tests your mettle every day. That never stops. You are condemning yourself to a life of walking through doors and meeting people who don't know you and convincing them how much they need you. And if you don't have a sense of what's special about yourself, what you bring to the party, and how you make their headaches easier, it's not going to happen. We are all sizes, shapes, and colors, but this is a career for a brave person. There is ego involved in the best way, not the worst way. But you got to know who you are walking in the door, because they're not going to tell you, and they're going to wait for you to make it clear to them.
And I broke into animation with a great teacher, and I was Joe Barbera, Hanna-Barbera Productions. He had two things. Make it loud, because I'm paying a lot of money for this, so you can hear it. And he leaned heavily on impressions. He loved impressions of people. Dawes Butler, who was Yogi Bear, and this and that, and they were all takeoffs on known people. And if you could do that for him, too, he would say out of the blue, he'd call me on the phone and say, can you do... I said, I don't know, Joe, I've never tried. And he said, well, try it. And I had to give him an audition over the phone. And he said, that works. And I come in and do this thing. And I went places I had never been before, and it worked. Only because of his encouragement and his buying certain things that I tried, sometimes for the first time. But it was also, I found, interesting to have a handle to go back to the next week. He said, I did this. It might have been a bad Katharine Hepburn. No, you could actually do Katharine Hepburn as a male and get a sound that was acceptable. I'm pulling that out of the blue, but nevertheless, it was a handle that you had for the next time you worked the show in a series, we'll say. You could grab onto this and go and maybe expand on it. A lot of characters that started out, in fact, one story Joe told, and this is true, we were working at Flintstone, and Mel Blanc came back after our hiatus. We would do 39 shows, take off, come back and do 39 shows, and Joe said, that's very good, Mel, but it ain't Bonnie Rubble. And Mel went, because he had never been told that he wasn't on the nose, and he was right. Joe was right. He had an infallible ear, and he brought him back to what he was supposed to be. So if it could happen to Mel Blanc, it can happen to anybody.
But you have to commit yourself. You must commit yourself. One of the things I teach is plagiarize, don't shade your eyes. That's why God made you, so you plagiarize. And what you do is, I teach my class and I say, you watch AMC movies, watch the old characters from the 40s and the 30s, because they were very specialized. They had qualities that you don't see a great deal of today. There are some today, but they're not as much, that have a special wrinkle to their sound. Supposing your girl wanted to have to play the character of a bimbo, okay? I would suggest Judy Holliday from Born Yesterday.
Because she talked like that, right?
And then you have Bullets Over Broadway. I think it's Meg or one of the Tilly sisters.
And she's got that sound over there.
That is sort of your standard basic. So you wind up not only developing as an actor or an actress, but you also have to know where you're going with that character. When you look at a sheet, and they give us a sheet, and they say, okay, this is a turtle. What are you going to do? My first concept is, and I think for many of us, is who would do this if this was an on-camera? Would you have Strother Martin? Who would play this character? Would it be a voice over here? You know, perhaps he talks like this. Maybe it's a turtle that talks like this.
Maybe he talks like this.
Absolutely. And you've got your choices. You've got your areas to go with it. Who possibly sounded like that? When we talk about Dawes, when we talk about Yogi Bear, and those characters, those were, to my ear, and I imagine to Dawes as well, if you remember the Jackie Gleason show, it was Art Carney. Hey, all right, how you doing? You know? That's where a lot of that stuff comes from. It is a form of plagiarism, but they got it from somebody else. They got it possibly from life or from a character that they've seen. And that's where Mel Blanc, who I've worked with and adored, he listened to other people as well. You don't just say, I'm going to do a voice. That's not how it works. It has to come from a granite nucleus of acting ability, because you have to do the highs and the lows. And a classic example is, a lot of times when we did shows, I did the Smurfs for about 5 or 6 years or something, and they would bring in guest stars. And some of the guest stars they brought in did wonderful impressions, but they couldn't do those characters outside of their act. They couldn't do the character doing the dialogue that they were given, because they basically weren't actors. They were impressionists. You had to go a step further.
Well, true. Any multi-voice actor flexible enough and versatile enough to call yourself a multi-voice actor should have one. Glean from the other people who care about a project, the more it feeds what I bring to the party. And so, like like John was saying, you open your mouth and see what comes out, and maybe it's a sum total of 3 or 4 of those characters that we've talked about, and something new is born, and you're as surprised as they are, and everybody says, that works, you know, and you're off.
I recall a guy who used to bill himself as a man of 1,000 voices, and then in this kind of side would say, and they all sound the same.
That's true. That's true. There's somebody back here too, I think. All the way in the back.
He's got the microphone.
Who's got the microphone? You've got it. It's yours.
So I win.
He wins. Now the microphone wins. You have to get it next. Go ahead.
Bonus points for the Tom Lehrer record.
Yes. Yes, it is Tom Lehrer. Absolutely. Good for you. But I think it also came before him. I think that Plagiarized, if I'm not mistaken, came from Danny Kaye from a motion picture called Lady in the Dark. And it came from a song. Yeah, go ahead.
For all that wonderful information.
You can ask me a question. Yes.
Pretend for a moment the other guys aren't here and describe what they're like and what it was like to work with them.
To work with these two guys?
Yeah, just for all of you.
Well, when John wasn't mooning Wally Berg, and I remember once when Gregg wet himself during the election. No, actually, professionals. I mean, it's just bottom line professionals, and quieter actually than most of the guys that we work with. I mean, quieter than, just sort of more dependable to listen to for the director. At least if I was a director, I'd be more comfortable rather than working with me or Peter Cullen or Frank, who is silly, or the late Chris Latta, who is sillier than most and louder than most. And interestingly enough, what we all did, whether we realized it or not, because it's second nature, is listen to the other character's character, to their voices, and sometimes might even done it on the way home. Because God knows when they might get struck with the flu and you might have to fill in, or maybe something worse. So you wound up trying to say, well, can you do Starscream? Can you do this other character? Well, you know, some of us have, I didn't have the pipes for most of that. I had the pipes for what I had for, and that was pretty much it. I probably could do Sue Blue, but that's about it. But for the most part, in terms of the other actors, most of us were really pretty wacky. Gregg would slide them in, and John would slide them in. We'd have to listen carefully when we hear this bit of wisdom. But most of us will not. We'd sort of climb over them.
Next batter?
Next batter. So wait a second. I know we got somebody all the way in the back. Does he have? He's got the mic back there.
That would be me.
And you are?
My name is Charles.
Okay, Charles.
First of all, I'd like to say it's an honor to be here in your great and mighty presence.
And we didn't say anything about you guys. Thank you.
No, that's not the fine.
Yes.
But, Mr. Berger, I have a comment.
Me not worthy!
I have a comment about something you said earlier. I honestly believe that voice actors are not the bottom of the food chain. The writers, yes, they make the words, but the voice actors bring the passion. They're the ones that deliver.
Not the right.
Thank you, and I was trying to clarify that I'm not underestimating that contribution, but we are furnished with the words that someone else labored over. We're in session to bring life to that and breathe life to that.
Yes, and I believe that each and every one of you have done a marvelous job with the characters that you've done over the years. Just a marvelous job. And one of the questions I have, one of many which I probably won't get to ask, but how exactly do you get that one particular tone or pitch for that character? Like, how did you come across for Grimlock? How did you know that was Grimlock?
I've been sort of taken from the time I used to ride the bus with my mom when I was little by the way people's faces were constructed, and I remember this as an early memory. And I would engage people on the bus in conversation to see if they sounded like I thought they were going to sound.
Are you my daddy?
And I saw the medal in Grimlock, and when I first auditioned, and for the first several, until I could sort of find it. I wanted something metallic and not too high in the IQ or robotic gene pool. And the rest was fishing with. I think the other thing that I probably tried at the outset to bring to it was sort of this stupidity and nobility in the same entity. And I think the whole Transformer phenomenon, there is sort of a responsibility that comes with that much size and that much strength. And if it's used for good, then it's good to the 100th power. If it's used for evil, it's evil to the 100th power. And that's the dynamic of light and dark. But I remember at the outset, because everybody made fun of me as I did it.
But first I was really restraining my facial muscles with my own two hands.
Oh, Gary Owens in that show.
What's that?
Oh, Gary Owens in that.
There you go. In that restraint, the rest is being fed, again, by people on the other side of the glass that have the big picture. It works or it doesn't. And you keep fiddling and fine-tuning and changing and refining until somebody says, don't forget what you just did. That we can ride out for as long as we need to. I mean, I think that's true with the creation of every character. Tennis players say there's a sweet spot on the racket. And if the ball hits that sweet spot, you never forget what that felt like. You may not be able to find it every time you want to, but you know where that zone is, and you need to lock it in mentally. And that's an ability. I don't know if that's teachable, but you recognize it when it happens to you.
I'm learning.
You also take the character sketches and the visual effects of that character into consideration when you're developing the attitude as well.
For me, I'm totally visually oriented at the outset of a project, and I try to figure out what that face sounds like. And the rest is all just internal workings, and I don't know if I can translate that into words that are tellable. But it just triggers things for any of us. I mean, that is my process, although it's not explainable.
To think about that for a second, because the writer writes a long biography sometimes of the character and gives you information, so much information, you'd be hard-pressed to do that on an audition. There is so much information of what they feel like when they go to work and how their reaction is to somebody else, etc. And then you need really the basics. And what, for me, is often the basics is the picture. Like for Gregg and most everybody, assuming that a character has an underslung jaw, they're not trying to talk about the characters like this.
So he has his underslung jaw, etc.
And that makes it work for me.
If he looks at the corner of his mouth, he's going to sound totally different on mic than if he speaks like this.
And that will help. So
I worked with Buddy Hackett at one point, and they couldn't get the sound right. And he said, "No, you got to mic me over here, because that's what I'm talking about."
Dude, where's the microphone? The microphone's over there. Okay.
No.
We can hear you.
I actually did a turn now.
And your name is?
Cat.
Cat?
Yeah, me and my friend are really, really big fans of Prowl, and so we're wondering if you could do, in Prowl's voice, his response to Get Him Hit On.
Getting hit on.
Okay, your room or mine?
I think it's wherever the mic is.
Wherever the mic is. We have to go wherever the mic is. It's actually follow the mic.
Over here.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, you've been businessmen, madmen, government agents. Do you prefer doing good guy voices, bad guy voices? You pick a habit of the bad guys, I guess, but do you have any preference?
I like ham.
Yeah, you just an actor, but just beware of the scene where you give us bad guys. Ooh, that's
The hero
fun.
is rather boring.
The only nice thing about a hero, the heroes are pretty boring. The only nice thing about a hero, for the most part, is that, as I said before, we get the opportunity to play characters we generally don't play on screen. I mean, I get to have great abs and sensational biceps, triceps, and to get a little grosser, a huge puppy place. So it's always
No, there's more character in the Pashwalk because he's got a lot of bad in him and going for him. and you can find that and work with it. But the good guy has to sound almost one note, and he shouts a lot.
we all shout a lot.
You remember those. You've seen enough of those to see it's always like this, it's always big, and it's always strong. Oh, me. There's no one ever goes, oh, God help me. The funny thing is that when you cry for help, you can't let your voice go up to that register, because I know, and we all know, you get to a certain point, somebody walks in the room, you don't know they're there, and no matter how butch you may be, somebody goes, ah! You really sound like a little kid next door. You go, oh, what was that? Oh. You can't do that. So when the bad guy's coming at you, and you're looking, and it says ARRGH, HHH, somebody help me. You can't go, oh, somebody help me. It's gonna be, ah, somebody help me. Oh, I can do it myself, but maybe you can help me out. Where's the mic? Here we go. What's your name?
Srini.
Srini. How do you spell that?
S-R-I-N-I.
Okay, good.
It's for Gregg Berger.
Yes.
Duckman and Transformers were like my favorite shows ever. I just want to say you did an outstanding job on both of them. Since Grimlock and Cornfed are probably the least and most intelligent characters you ever played, respectively, personality-wise. Could you do an impression of doing the meeting for the first time?
Something back to us.
Me, Grimlock, who you?
My name is Cornfed Pig. What planet are you from?
Me worked with many beings and Constructicons and entities from many planets and galaxies.
I work for a private dick named Duckman.
You pick up check for Grimlock lunch?
Yeah, I can probably swing that.
Mr. Stephenson?
Yes.
Cap is perhaps the oldest character portrayed in the Transformers series, and many of us fans have parody fan fiction that we enjoy. And I was wondering, could you please say, as Cup, Claymen are fast, where's my medication? Claymen are fast, where's my medication?
You said that this morning.
Claymen are fast. Where's my medication?
Hi, my name is Sim. Can the three of you briefly address how your surroundings have changed over time? How working in the studio, different technology, different roles, how the industry's changed, work moving to Canada, things like that.
Oh, dirty word. Well, I'll start on by saying that there's really no heart. The heart is being taken out of the animation industry, I think. The fun. It's mostly get the product out and get it on the screen, and some of them, there are a lot of holes in it, and there isn't a artistic approach to what we do or did. It's done piecemeal. You sometimes don't see the other people that are in the particular episode you're working, and that's not fun. Now, we used to, and in some cases they still do, work the show from the top to the bottom, and there's interaction, interplay, fun when you're not on mic, when they're setting things up. It's an experience that you enjoy, you walk out of high. Now it's get there, get in, get out, and collect the check, I think.
You're right. It's Taco Bell. It is now Taco Bell. At one point it was a boutique kind of business. We would sit down, we'd sit at a long table, and we'd all read the piece first. And the director would take you through it, and no matter how big the cast was, and you would work on those, you'd have those characters ready as you read your script. Don't forget, you had your character. This was some time ago, you owed them 3 voices. Now you owe them 2 voices for the price of 1. We worked on that. But for a long period of time, we owed them 3 voices, so you had to be prepared to do 2 subsidiary voices and a major voice, or maybe 2 major voices and a subsidiary voice, all for the same paycheck. That way they didn't have to pay 2 other actors to do those other 2 voices. So you really had to be versatile. And under the circumstances, when you sat down, you had that script, and you worked on all those different characters, and you pulled them out of your bag and you had them ready. And you were able to interact with the other actors, and you got to play, and you got to have a good time, and then they recorded, and it was more family-oriented. Now it's a cold, hard slap. You go in, you do it, there's often not another actor with you, so you don't know what the other actor did that your reaction is to. So let's assume that they were being obsequious, or let's assume they were being sarcastic. You can react sarcastically, whereas you don't know. You have to depend upon the director who you don't always trust. And then you wind up sometimes giving a performance, and then you see it on television or even in a film, you go, that's not the reaction to that. That's not what my character would have done. It's too late. It's up there. That's what John is talking about. And that, you want to think what you're doing is artistic to some degree, and that it's all working as a unit, and it doesn't always happen. When they can cut it together and it works that way, you don't know the difference.
So many of these questions like that one, we could talk for an hour on these subjects. I've had the great good fortune and luxury of working on The Simpsons. I understudy Sideshow Bob, Kelsey Grammer, when he's not available to do table reads. They still maintain this process that we used to be familiar with, where it starts with a table read, it's refined and refined and refined, and even on record day, you record a scene and they come running in with changes to the scene from what they just heard. Refine, 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 and days before it goes to air, if there's something slightly topical or suggestive that they can add, you go back and you refill those mouth flaps with words of a better joke or whatever. There's a reason that they maintain the standard of excellence that I feel they do.
What I resent is in studios like Disney putting out a one-line audition for a character, and you have no idea where he's coming from. You want to give them at least 4 shots at it, 4 different characters, but you can't always do this. They want one voice, and they're going to live and you're going to live and die with that, whatever you do.
I wanted to stay on this subject for a minute, and then I do have a response to the Canadian, some of the flight of the work to Canada. There are a lot of, at the moment, artists who are being drawn into the process because their work is good and they may be young, just out of school, still in school. Cartoon Network is pulling in a lot of artists, and a lot of times they're given more autonomy than I think even they may be looking for at that stage of their career. So having created a character, that doesn't necessarily make them a voice director of note yet. So sometimes there's a process of fishing around or trying to make it happen too quickly, or inability to communicate. That's a special skill, especially actor-directors who direct actors. There's a language, there's a shortcut to getting what you need without telling someone how to do it. Painting a picture for them so the director gets the result he wants, the actor is happy with the result, and the product works. Also, there's a good side and a bad side to these splits, mostly bad. Men in Black, we do all ensemble. It's all full company record. Duckman was done in splits. That worked to my advantage because I was on location in Russia for 2 months doing a film and was getting calls in the hotel. They sent me with little portable, like, spy DAT tape recorder, which I had to explain at customs. But they were calling me in my room in Moscow. I was recording tracks from there, sending the digital audio tape via Federal Express, and being cut into the show from 8,000 miles away. So selfishly, it was a good thing. But as far as performance, there is no substitute for actors being allowed to sort of feed off each other and encouraged and allowed to be creative in session. As far as Canada, just very quickly, the concern.
That's Canada.
The concern is that a lot of shows that begin the process down here and record auditions down here may decide sometime between that time and production time to take the production to Canada. If they do, this is not a paranoia because it's not unfounded. If they take voice tracks that they've recorded here and shared sort of that creative beginning birthing process here, and those tracks go to Canada, there is, I won't say a likelihood, but there's certainly a possibility that those voice tracks, which were all nurtured down here, begun down here, it's going to pick up there where it left off here, where we were part of the birthing process, but not part of the actual production. That is a concern.
Who's got the mic? Okay, go ahead.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to say it's excellent to have you here. It's nice to see the G1 voice actors from the Best of the Transformers series. And I personally really appreciate your discussion on the nature of the characters, that it's the entire nature of the character that goes into the voice, that it's not just showing up and reading a few lines. I personally appreciate that a lot. And I have kind of a frivolous question. I realize that all of you have done several different characters, but I guess you each had one really major famous character. We have essentially Thundercracker, Grimlock, and Prowl. And I noticed that the three of you are dressed in the colors of those characters, and I wonder if
Grimlock wore hot pants?
Not where we can see them.
That's interesting. I don't think we gave any plan to that.
If so, it was on a deeply subliminal level.
We believe our characters. Who's got the mic next? Yes.
Well, my name is Jamil. I have a quick question for you as actors. I know there are some shows that go on for a while and you have to do a number of characters. I was wondering if you ever have a problem with character bleed over. I mean, a character is a voice and more than that, they have a personality. You have to keep those personalities individual and separate in your mind. I was just wondering if you have the problem occasionally of characters sort of bleeding over into one another, and if so, how do you refine the focus?
Well, I think for me, from series to series, there's only so far you can stretch yourself. You keep trying to stretch yourself as much as you can. But often, it's very interesting, I will find when I'm watching shows, and I will see a particular show, then see another show, and say, well, that's so interesting, that character, that actor, and sometimes myself used on that show, is very, very similar to another show, because there's only so far I can go, unless I employ the use of a dialect, or usually, which will be helpful. So if it's
a character that talks like this in one show, perhaps he talks like this in another show. Or maybe has this sound like that in another show. But it's still the basic voice. If you listen to Mel Blanc, who to me is the quintessential great voice actor, there's not that much of a difference in terms of the tonality of his characters. It is the attitude of his characters, and maybe a slight wrinkle, the S. Something like this. But still, if it's Buzz, or whoever it is, or Staffy, whatever, it's something else that's employed, but the attitude is a little bit different. And you buy the fact that that's a different character. And that's really a kind of, there's a kind of magic to that if you're doing on camera, you need to do physically with makeup and latex, etc. Where we, as Gregg pointed out, we paint the picture for you. If you couldn't see, you would know who that character was. If you couldn't see it, that's how we teach. There's an actress who does Rugrats with me, Tiana Kwan. She is blind, and she plays my daughter Kimmy on the series. And as a result, she has to listen to the other characters, and she had said to me, I knew who everybody was because you guys painted the picture for me. And she was the person who said, I'm going to get into this business, because you guys asked about this earlier. And she persevered and studied acting and did the whole thing. And even she jokes about the fact, she said, I did stage work till I fell off. She said, I realized that was the wrong venue for my talent. So she said, I went back into voiceover. She said, and she had studied with me for a short period of time. And then next thing I know, she's playing my daughter, and she's playing Kimmy on this thing. And she said she listens to the characters, and then even her own character, she hears better than I. You know, when I close my eyes, I got to hear what that character sounds like. And you listen to it back, and you listen to other characters. It is not just the voice, because how far can I possibly go? And you know, there's a few of us that have that range, and a few of us have this range, and we better make a living in this range. So you use dialects, but you employ your acting ability. And sometimes, yes, it does bleed over. But when I listen to Mel and I say, yeah, it bleeds over, but I buy it. It's great.
Now, engineers will try to help you with that. I mean, most of us in the field are capable of having conversations with ourselves. The engineer joke is, you listen back to a character who's just talked to themselves, and they say, I think you were overlapping yourself. But the way the engineers will help, even if you're capable of sustaining those changes through the course of the dialogue, which we've all done, is a lot of times they will do that in sections, where you'll record one character all the way through, and then you'll go back and pick up the other character all the way through. The biggest danger of bleeding over is when you're talking to yourself, because without a clear division, because you want to keep the flow of the scene going.
I think Michael said it all very succinctly, but in our first show when we were in trouble, it was a Flintstone series, the first show of the Flintstone series. I found, and not until I saw the show premiere in 1961, I believe, and saw myself coming in and out the door saying hello to myself as two different characters. And that show, because they were up against the wall and didn't realize it, I played 9 characters. Now, where did it, so like 9 chicks? I mean, 3 chicks, excuse me. Where did the 3-voice thing come from? It came from radio. They didn't know what to do with animation when they first came on the scene, but in radio, you were permitted and allowed, and in fact, it was necessary to use actors in 3 different characters. And we did it all the time. But when they got into animation, we said, what do we do? They said, we want 3 voices from these guys. They said, well, it's impossible. But it wasn't impossible, and that's how they got the 3-voice rule in animation, where they were allowed to get that 3rd voice for the same price as 1. But they really pressed when. But of course, let's be honest, in doing the 9 voices, I was playing garbage disposals and birds and everything else. But there were humans too at that time, humanoids. Okay, thank you.
Quick side note, as long as John brought up radio, Michael was talking about having students look back at 40s films. There is sort of an evolution from burlesque through radio to, say, films of the 40s. Because people's roots were usually either in radio or aimed at radio, who wound up in film, you had to have a distinctive voice. You had to have, not necessarily a gimmick, but something about you had to be so distinctive that it registered the minute you began to speak, because that was radio. When those people found their way into film, it was a very distinctive era of film. Very clearly drawn characters. You knew who they were the minute they entered the room and the minute they opened their mouth. And that's why it's a good study ground.
Yeah, they made a career out of playing one character.
It's real good research. Real good research where to know what Peter Lorre sounds like and what Boris Karloff sounds like, and people like that, and of course Humphrey Bogart and all those characters, and Monroe. You'd be surprised how many times when a character comes up and they want somebody that's very gentle and sweet and slightly bimbo-ish, that so many people can't do this, so many women can't do that. And you've got to listen. You've got to listen with your ears, and then you can develop those characters. And it's fun, just even if you never get into the industry, you're gonna get married, you're gonna have kids. What fun to be able to tell your kids stories and be able to say, and then the dragon came along and scare the shit out of your kid.
There we got the microphone.
Hey guys, thanks for coming. John, I noticed when you were asked to do a line from Cup, you closed your eyes. I know you guys have all done so many thousands of characters before the Transformer ones that were most probably interested in. I wondered if you might shed a little more light on the things, you closed your eyes and you got yourself immediately, I mean, your voice just changed. I mean, I went from hearing, I think your natural voice a little more Alpha Trion, and all of a sudden something just clicked and you were Cup. We heard Cup. I wondered if you might expand, each of you, on what things specifically in the Transformer characters you did, you were told, you think in your own mind still to this day, if you're thinking about, I want to do Bombshell, I want to do, Skyfire, what things do you think of? Okay, Big Jet, but if each of you can do that, then we can.
Big Jet. And so I did it, and she said, yeah, that's it, I said, oh, good, I had no idea. But mostly, it's tough at this stage, 17 years later, to regurgitate these voice characters. But the one that was probably closest to me was probably Cup and maybe Alpha Trion as an older person who was very soft-spoken and understanding, carried on, and nothing rattled him. And then there were one-shot characters that I enjoyed very much. The Gambler was a one-shot as Bosch, I believe. He was an electric sort of character who talked like this and took everyone in. Who loved gambling. It was mostly Shakespearean, I would say, that sort of thing. So you just fell into grooves, but when it comes to the other ones, I did have to close my eyes and remember who he was and when he was. So and when it comes to 6 characters and bringing them up like this, if this were 1983 instead of 2003, I would probably have a better opportunity to be on the nose.
I did a character called Outback, and I remember I would always stumble into the Australian dialect by 3 words. The 3 words were certain vowel sounds. There's certain vowel sounds that just throw you in Australia. Long haul was a big yellow dump truck, a lot of these, thems, and those, and essentially no respect.
Skyfire was a very interesting character, and I remember being particularly impressed with not only his size, strength, and stature, but his battle of conscience. If this is BotCon, he was the original con bot.
And the other is easy.
Me Grimlock, me big and smart, but me have severe pronoun trouble.
Disadvantage because I got some help last night when really super ladies in the corner do Prowl. It was in autumn? No, it was autumn.
Autumn.
Okay.
She's
bad.
back there.
Back there, okay, well, it's right there. And this is the winter spring fires. and they said Prowl, and I said Prowl, they said it was soft, and of course it was right over there. Clint Eastwood. And then, of course, I remembered Swoop, because I did a lot of Swoop, as I recall. There was a particular show on Swoop.
What was Swoop? Ah, yes, me Swoop.
Which is, I think I'm illegitimate Grimlock somewhere. Now, I must be honest with you, I can't remember First Aid Bombshell and Scrapper and Sideswipe in my head, because you had to come up with it. Then, as they say, they'd go, okay, do this, well, you're going to do this character. And say, we talked about imprint. Well, let's see, I did, okay, I did this. And I did this.
Maybe I've been deeper here, and I'm not going to
his pipes because I needed injections for that, but I still, get it down here.
And maybe someone's up here, someone's in this area here.
So I was all over the place until I could lock in, so I really can't tell you exactly where the Sideswipe, Scrapper, Prancer, Dancer, and Vixen sound like. Actually, maybe you'd have to remind me. If you remind me, maybe I can come up with it.
We found Dr. Fujiyama last night.
You found what?
Dr. Fujiyama?
Well, Dr. Fujiyama, obviously because his Japanese background would have, that sound.
There's this special comic for BotCon that was created by a guy over there called Transproof, and Prime's Total Moron, Prowl's basically called the head, and Grimlock's really smart. So I was wondering, could Prowl say shut up Prime and have Grimlock be sounding smart, and could you do okay for Men in Black?
Now, if I do Prowl saying shut up Prime, in a particular attitude, you mean? Like a bad attitude?
Yeah.
Okay. So shut up Prime with a bad attitude. Okay, stifle it, Prime. Bad man. Shut up.
Me Grimlock is smart, you cesium salami. Baloney, what you talk about?
It sounds like the Crips and the Bloods.
That isn't funny you're talking about earlier about his having a bloodbath. Afraid of having a vocal bloodbath. Years ago, on a Barbera show, when dinosaurs were in vogue, I was asked to do a sound effect of one of the two dinosaurs in a battle, a life and death battle, and I ended up growling and making sounds. And as I was doing this, I looked at my script and there was blood on it. And I said, there goes my career. Instead, after the show, I kept going because the show has to go on. I went directly to the ENT man and he gave me an exam and said, no, you have ruptured a little thing, but it's going to be all right.
You were very fortunate you never did adult films, John. I'm going to tell you, just going to go very quickly in terms of, again, Mel Blanc, a commitment. I don't know if anybody grew up with Speed Buggy. It was years ago. And Mel, of course, was this great car. Mel did this, and I had an opportunity to work with Mel, and he sat on my right, and I was the lead young guy character, spoke like every young guy sounded like, well, golly, Miss Brooks, like Richard Crenna. We all did this wonderful sound. And I'm working with the great Mel Blanc. We did a couple of commercials together, but not on a steady basis. And Mel is on my right. And all the guest casts are over here. The guest bad guy, there's always a guest bad guy that's going to try to beat this car. And Mel was just all that, whatever. And he was sitting on my right, and we were getting underway in the script, commitment. And I have a line to him, and he goes, yeah, that's what and I'm sopping wet. And Mel, there's nobody else in the room. As far as Mel goes, he was never there. And I'm sitting there, good God, and I've got a whole show to go. And here we're going on with the show, and he goes, okay, and I found myself throughout the show going like this. Someone in the left going, pushing me out of the way. So the next show
Now I get to tell this story.
The next show, and at the end of that show, I was a towel. I mean, it was like doing stuff like I never wore short sleeves again. And a flannel and a towel over there. And I would never say anything to him because that's what he does. The next time that show we had come in, we had a bad guy come in who was a guest star, was my friend Alan Oppenheimer. It was great fun to play jokes on. And I said, Al, since your stuff is basically with Mel, why don't you sit next to him? So Al sits next to him. Nobody else notices. I'm not sitting to anybody else in the cast. So we're all a seat down. Sitting, it's like radio. We're all sitting opposite these mics. They're in Hanna-Barbera, these long chairs, etc. And we're starting. And I'm looking at Al and just wanted to see his first reaction. And of course, Mel does it. And Al was like this. I was. And he turns around to look at me like this, and I'm like this. Mel is just in another world. Mel is just looking at the script and waiting for the next time to go. Every time that Al, I can see slowly leaving. I'm pushing and I have to tell you that because that's just the all-time great on the
You asked for Agent K.
Shoot him, Jay. Shoot him. He's a cerebrothecaloid. Their brains are in their bottoms. Jay, get in the car. Well, you can't drive, Jay. Give me the keys, Jay.
Unfortunately with that, unless our guests have any closing thoughts or words of wisdom for us.
I have some words of wisdom. Back to that question about talking about each other. It's easier to talk about the entire voice community than it is to talk about specific guys in it. I'm an eternal optimist, and I pretty much like everybody until they give me a reason not to. I consider the entire voice community that we work in to be so considerate of each other. I think there's an understanding in every waiting room that anybody on that couch can do anything that is needed, and that you get what you get because you were right for a specific application. Not that you were better than anybody else, more talented, more versatile, more anything, just more right that day for that project. I think there is so much respect that I see, in addition to the fact that those lobbies have the best jokes anywhere in Hollywood. And for those of us who work in the on-camera community as well, I think there's a much more competitive atmosphere in the waiting rooms of on-camera auditions, because primarily, more often than not, it's going to start and end with a look. You got to look right, and that's something you have to bring in. It's not something that you can add when you get in. You sort of got what you got. The rest is going to be told by the way you interpret the material. But like I said, I think at the beginning of this, we can be any size, any shape, any ethnicity, anything, all of us, and the only limitations are your own. And I consider myself very fortunate to be in this community, not only because of the level of talent involved, but also the fact that it tends to be we're readers. What we do is read, and it tends to be a very well-read community, a really, and you don't get it from the past hour, you won't get it, funny community, smart, intelligent, funny, talented, and considerate of each other.
And you guys, thank you so much, God. To have fans like you, to have that kind of interest is really overwhelming for us. It's very, because we kind of put this to bed and thought, oh, well, that's it, we did that, we're on to the next thing, and had no idea you were out there. Thank you, and thank you for swoop.